The bridge is really a critical part of the sound production. The bridge is definitely something that can wear out a lot quicker than other parts of the violin. So what are some problems that can happen with the bridge? Maybe you've been playing the violin for a little while now and you've heard people refer to different parts of the violin, but you're not really sure what they are or what they do. That's why we're going to go through all the parts of the violin and explain their roles in how you make music. I'm Michelle, the Intentional Violinist, and this channel is all about sharing what I've learned through my experience and research as an adult learner of the violin. So the body of the violin is kind of the main part, if you will, and that's because it's the resonant part of the violin where the sound is produced. And so that includes all of this wood here on the top, on the back, and the sides that joins together to create this hollow chamber. But individually, the body is made up of a lot of different parts as well. This piece of wood on the front is called the top plate, and it's usually made of spruce, which is chosen for its resonant properties, and that helps give the violin its beautiful sound. So it's a really important piece of the sound production puzzle, if you will. And it could be made of one piece of wood, or it could be two pieces of wood that are joined. The top plate can certainly be subjected to changes in humidity, which can cause the wood to shrink or swell, and that can actually cause cracks in the wood. So be sure not to subject your violin to huge humidity swings. But if you do see a crack or anything like that, then be sure to stop playing and take your violin to a reputable luthier right away. So then if we flip the violin over, this large piece of wood back here is called the back plate because it's on the back. And you can see that this is two pieces of wood that were joined together, and it could be one or it could be two. Back plates are usually made of maple because that wood actually helps to reflect the sound toward the top of the violin where the F holes are so the sound can come out. Like the front plate, the back plate also can be subject to cracks with humidity fluctuations, and a crack on the back is really not good. So make sure you keep your violin in a stable environment. So then on the side of the violin, this wood here, this is referred to as the ribs, and they are usually made of maple as well. And they join the back plate and the top plate together to form the hollow chamber. And the way that they're joined is with hide glue, which is very strong glue, but it's not permanent. So the bond can be reversed if a luthier needs to get on the inside of the violin and do some work if they were repairing cracks or something like that. So that's the good part about it, but because it is reversible, sometimes if your violin is subjected to extreme humidity changes or temperature fluctuations, then the hide glue might lose that bond and you can actually get separation here. So if you see anything that looks like maybe there's a little opening or, it's not joined together quite like it was before, that's something else that you'd want to take your violin to the luthier and have that checked out. These are called F holes probably because they resemble a lowercase f, and that's where the sound escapes the hollow chamber of the violin, comes out into the world, and then we can hear our beautiful violin music. Historically, there's been a lot of experimentation around the shape of these holes, not only on violins, but other instruments as well, like mandolins and lutes and all the variations that existed over centuries. But ultimately, these were really settled on for the violin because it produces the best sound. Modern studies have proved that the elongated F-hole design is significantly more acoustically powerful than circular holes. So this is the design that we have now. Purfling is this decorative inlay that you see around the edge of the top and the back plate. And it's usually made of 3 thin strips of wood, 2 black and 1 white. And they're glued into a shallow channel carved into the wood. So this is actually little bits of wood that have been put into a carved out channel. This is not drawn on or just a decorative design. It actually serves a practical purpose, and that's to help prevent cracks from spreading inward from the edge. So if you've bumped your violin and gotten a little ding on the edge, it's not going to spread inward as a big crack. Inside the body, we have the bass bar. And you can't really see it unless you hold your violin up like this and kind of look in the holes a little bit, and maybe you can see it. But that's just a thin strip of spruce generally that's glued to the top plate here on the bass side of the violin. And it's the bass side because we have the G and the D strings, the lower strings on this side. And it has 2 functions. So one is actually to help support the top plate against the downward pressure of the bridge and the strings, because these strings are held under tension. So the bass bar actually helps keep the top plate stronger to support that pressure. And then its other function is to distribute the vibrations from the bass side of the bridge across the entire top plate, which is crucial for producing the low frequency sounds of the G and the D strings. The other very crucial part inside of the violin body is the sound post, which you've probably heard of because everybody's always talking about sound posts, it seems like. And that you can actually see a lot easier looking inside your violin. But the sound post itself actually isn't even attached to the violin body at all. So it's almost not even really a part of the violin, except that it is something the violin needs to function. It's a small cylindrical dowel of spruce, again, generally, and it just stands upright inside the violin, wedged between the top and the back plates. It's located on the treble side, where we have our higher strings, our A and our E. And like the bass bar, it also helps to support the top plate, preventing it from collapsing under string tension. It also acts as a crucial link, transferring vibrations from the top plate to the back plate. And so it's really important, really involved in the sound production of the violin, and just moving the sound post a tiny little bit, maybe a millimeter, can actually alter the sound of the violin. I don't recommend making any adjustments to the sound post yourself. Definitely take your violin to a reputable luthier to make those adjustments. But something that does happen is that maybe your case falls or something and something gets bumped, and these sound posts actually can get knocked loose and it'll be rattling around in your violin. If that happens, you'll want to loosen the tension on your strings and then just put your violin in its case, keep it safe, and take it to a luthier as soon as possible, so that way they can put the sound post back in. Have you ever had something like that happen, or have you taken your violin to the luthier for some sort of repair? If so, what needed work? Let me know in the comments below. Now, the neck is this piece right here, where we generally hold the violin, and it's connected to the body here. And it supports our fingerboard, which is this black piece of wood. And that's what I'll talk about next. But the neck, it's also made of maple, like a lot of other parts of the violin. And it's left unvarnished. And that's because we're always in contact with the violin here. So if we had it varnished, the constant contact with the hand would wear off the varnish really quickly. As I was just saying, the fingerboard here is on top of the neck. It's glued to the neck, and it is where we press our fingers down to play notes on the strings. And the fingerboard actually has a curve, so it's a little bit lower on the sides than at the top. And that curve matches the shape of the bridge, so that way the strings are not all on the same level and you won't be hitting one while you're trying to play another. It's usually made of ebony, which often, not always, but often is a naturally black wood, which is why the fingerboard looks black. And ebony is chosen because it's a very dense, hard wood. And so it holds up really well to the wear and tear of being played, because over time, your fingers pushing on the strings against the fingerboard actually can leave divots or marks in the fingerboard. And so if that happens, you would maybe get your fingerboard replaned, basically sanded down, and smoothed out, or it could be replaced. That's generally not going to happen unless you've been playing for decades, but just something to know about. Above the fingerboard, we actually have the nut. And you can see that there's a little bit of a line. So you can see the separation between the fingerboard here and then the nut here. And this little piece, also made of ebony, sits a little bit higher than the fingerboard. And it has grooves for each of the 4 strings to sit in. So that way they're properly aligned for playing and they can't move from like side to side. Over time, the strings can widen or deepen these grooves. And so what I recommend whenever you change your strings is just taking a pencil and just shading in that area a little bit, drawing in there. The graphite from the pencil actually acts as a lubricant, so it reduces friction and reduces the wear and tear that happens over time. And the nut actually plays a big part in determining the action or the height of the strings. That's called action. So how high above the fingerboard that your strings are, the space in between the strings and the fingerboard here, that's called the action. And so the nut actually has a big part in determining that. You could have the strings higher or lower, and that all depends on how deep or shallow the grooves are cut in the nut. That's not the only factor in determining action, but it definitely has a big part in that. So if you ever feel like you have to press just too much on the strings, they're just too high, you're pressing further down, or maybe you feel like I'm barely touching them and they're hitting the fingerboard, and so I want them a little bit higher, then that's something you could discuss with your luthier. They might recut a bridge for you or change the nut, or both. And so that would be something just to be aware of when you're playing, how things feel and what you might be able to change down the road if you need to. Moving up, we have the peg box. That's what this part here is called, where the pegs go in to the violin here in this little box. The pegs, you have 4 pegs for 4 different strings, right? And they actually get inserted into the peg box through the hole in the wood here. And the pegs obviously play an important role in keeping your violin in tune, right? And they are not cylindrical. They're actually like cone shaped. They're tapered. And so that actually allows the pegs to go into the hole, and you twist them and it creates friction that helps hold the pegs in place. Sometimes we deal with slipping pegs where our pegs won't stay in place. Sometimes we deal with pegs that are stuck and they won't move because they're in place way too well. So trying to find the right amount of friction is sometimes a challenge, but that is the simplicity of the pegs, just being held in place by twisting and pushing in and friction of the holes in the peg box. Now, all of this turning and twisting and pushing over time can actually wear out these holes in the peg box. If that happens, then again, this is not something that would happen unless you're playing for decades generally, but if you have an older violin, you might see it. Then what can happen is that these holes actually get bigger just from the turning and the friction of the pegs, and it creates a little bit bigger of a hole. And so if that happens, your pegs won't stay in place anymore because they just don't fit because the hole's gotten too big. So you could get new pegs that were fit to the new size of the holes. Or you could also get bushings, and that's a bit of wood that's actually inserted into the hole, kind of like a donut, and it makes the hole smaller. So that way we're not getting too big of a hole, because over time it could just be way too big for the size of the peg box. And then the scroll. And this is purely decorative. It doesn't have a direct function in sound production at all, but it's the signature part of the violin's design. It's a classic feature of violin making and reflects the luthier's craftsmanship and personality. The detail put into the scroll and the little differences between one maker's scroll and another maker's scroll actually can help you identify the maker of a violin if you're not sure who it is. So the scroll is definitely important to the history of the violin, but it doesn't do anything as far as sound production is concerned. It's just decorative. The bridge is this piece of wood here that our strings sit on top of. And the bridge is such an important piece of the violin. But like the sound post, it's not attached at all. There's no glue or anything like that. It's simply held in place by the tension of the strings. So that's why when you're changing your strings, you want to change your strings one at a time, meaning you're going to take off the G string, for example, and then you're going to put the new G string on. And you're going to get it close to in tune, if not completely, tension-wise, before you're going to take off the next string, the D string, and put on a new D string. Because if you take off all your strings at once, there's nothing to hold up the bridge, and it will just fall over and collapse. And you can actually damage your violin when that happens. But the bridge is really a critical part of the sound production. And that's because the sound travels from the vibrations of the strings down through the bridge and into the body of the violin. So what are some problems that can happen with the bridge? Because the bridge is definitely something that can wear out a lot quicker than these other parts of the violin. So the bridge has little grooves for the strings, just like the nut does. So the strings sit in those grooves just a little bit, just to keep them from moving side to side. But they can wear over time and actually cut a bigger groove out, which would not have our strings at the right height. They'd sit too low, and that would be bad. So that's something to look out for. That's actually why on a lot of E strings, you'll have a little plastic piece that can sit over the bridge. I don't have that on mine because I actually have this little sticker that goes over to help the E string from cutting in, because it's the thinnest, and so it can cut in a lot easier than the other strings. But when I am putting my new strings on, I also rub over the bridge with graphite from a pencil just to help reduce friction. So that way I'm not wearing out the bridge faster than normal. The bridge also tends to move a lot. There can be a lot of shifting, and generally that's coming from tuning the violin. A lot of times I have to raise the pitch. It's pulling the strings this way, right? They're tightening on the peg this way, and the strings are pulling this way. So what happens is it actually pulls the bridge this way too. And so you always want to check to see if your bridge is straight and it's not leaning, because if it's leaning, you want to fix that. That can actually cause the bridge to warp over time and just bend the shape of it, which is not good either. So those are a couple things to look for on the bridge, but it's definitely a very, very important part of the violin sound production. So down here we have the tailpiece, and this is just simply where the strings connect. It's another point of where the strings are held into place. So we've got them at the pegs at one end and the tailpiece at the other end. And both the tailpiece and the pegs can be made of all different types of wood. It's really aesthetic preference of the player, but it also can affect sound production a little bit. And then this is where the fine tuners, if you have them, also will be attached. So I have a fine tuner here on my E string. And then if you look here at the bottom of the violin, this little bit of string, if you will, is called the tail gut. And it's actually a loop of gut. If you've heard of gut strings, it's the same type of material. that would be sheep intestines generally. So it could be made of gut or nylon or some other material that they're using today. And that actually holds the tailpiece in place along with the strings at this end, then the tail gut at this end, going around what is called the end button. And that's because the tailpiece is not held in place by anything either. Just like the bridge, it's literally held in place by the tension of the strings on it and your tail gut that goes around the end button. So if you took off all your strings at the same time, then your tailpiece also could just fall into the violin and damage it. Not good. So don't do that. This end button is just a small little piece of wood. It's a little button at the bottom of the violin. And it's a tapered piece, kind of like the pegs, and it just gets inserted in to the bottom of the violin here and, a little hole, and it's just secured by friction, just like the pegs are. And then that's just what holds our tailpiece in place. So small, but crucial pieces of the violin. Each part of the violin comes together to create the violin's unique voice, thanks to makers like Stradivari, who refined the design through decades of experimentation. And every little detail, except for maybe the scroll, has a purpose. And I think an awareness of that will make you a better player. So I hope that gave you some knowledge on the parts of the violin and what they do. I'm the Intentional Violinist, and if you found this video informative, then the best way that you can help this channel is to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so that you can join our community of intentional violinists. Until next time, keep practicing. The bow is crucial for producing beautiful music. And like the violin, it has several parts that serve different functions and can be confusing for the beginner if you don't know what they are.